Have you ever wondered why you can understand exactly what you need to change, yet somehow keep repeating the same patterns? You know you should think differently about money. You know you should stop expecting the worst. You know you should pay more attention to opportunities instead of problems. And yet, a few hours later, you find yourself thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and making the same kinds of decisions. Maybe you've noticed this in your own life. You decide that this will be the week you become more confident with money. You wake up motivated. You feel hopeful. You tell yourself that things can change. Then something unexpected happens. A bill arrives. An expense appears. Someone says something negative about money. And suddenly, that old feeling returns. You start thinking, I can't afford this. I always struggle with money. Something always goes wrong. The interesting part is that none of these thoughts may feel like decisions. They simply appear. But what if one of the biggest changes in your life doesn't begin with changing everything? What if it begins with changing something so small that you almost don't notice it? A thought, a pause, a reaction, a different question. A small mental shift can change what you pay attention to. What you pay attention to can influence what you notice. What you notice can affect the choices you make, and repeated choices can gradually become habits. This is why small changes in your inner world can sometimes create much bigger changes in your outer behavior. Think about the way your mind works during an ordinary day. You don't consciously decide to notice every sound around you. You don't analyze every person you see. You don't question every thought that crosses your mind. Your attention filters enormous amounts of information, and your existing habits help determine what receives that attention. If you constantly expect problems, your mind may become very good at finding evidence of problems. If you constantly expect rejection, you may notice every small sign that seems to confirm it. And if you repeatedly think there are no opportunities available to you, you may overlook possibilities that you would have noticed if your attention were pointed somewhere else. This doesn't mean you can simply think positively and make everything you want appear. It means something much more practical. Your thoughts influence what you look for. What you look for influences what you notice. And what you notice can influence what you do next. That small sequence matters. Imagine two people facing the same financial challenge. Both see an unexpected expense. The first person immediately thinks, "This always happens to me. I'm never going to get ahead." That thought creates tension. The tension makes the problem feel even larger. The person may then avoid looking at the numbers, delay making a decision, or react emotionally. Now imagine the second person has the same initial reaction, but instead of immediately following it, they pause. They take one breath, and they ask, "What can I control right now?" The financial situation hasn't magically changed. The bill is still there. The amount is still the same. But the mental position has changed. And from that new position, a different response becomes possible. Maybe they review their expenses. Maybe they notice an unnecessary payment. Maybe they remember an opportunity they had ignored. Maybe they simply make a calmer decision instead of an emotional one. That is the power of a small mental shift. It doesn't need to change your entire life in one moment. It changes what happens next. And what happens next, repeated day after day, can become important. Theskaberoiwals, then video codens find pandoken tuin, unity duens page 79 people equal to self, alla verikoletrolikon in the propo gabiklu, the shudol sugloik in the bewadrid sesser that reader, and it's just having transulgord, it could sit on within shelves. You see something you want. A thought appears. I can't afford it. You receive money. Another thought appears. I need to spend this before something happens. You think about your future. Another thought appears. What if everything goes wrong? These thoughts can become so familiar that they feel like facts. But a familiar thought is not automatically a true thought. Sometimes it is simply a thought you have practiced many times. And the brain is capable of strengthening repeated patterns. This is one reason consistency matters when you're trying to develop a different way of responding. You don't need to force yourself to think completely differently all day. You can start by catching one moment. Just one. Maybe it's the moment you notice yourself saying, "I can't." Instead of fighting the thought, simply notice it. Then create a small space between the thought and your reaction. You might say to yourself, "That's an old thought." Then ask, "Is there another possibility I can consider?" That's it. No dramatic visualization. No attempt to convince yourself that everything is perfect. Just a small interruption, because that interruption gives you something valuable. Choice. And choice is where change begins. Maybe you've noticed that your strongest reactions often happen automatically. Someone mentions money, and you feel anxious. You check your bank account, and your stomach tightens. You think about investing in yourself, and immediately hear a voice saying, "You shouldn't spend money on that." These reactions may have been learned through years of experiences, conversations, disappointments, and repeated beliefs. You may have heard adults around you talk about money in fearful ways. You may have experienced periods when money really was limited. You may have learned that security means never taking a risk. There is nothing wrong with recognizing where these patterns came from. But understanding the pattern gives you an opportunity to respond differently. And you don't have to replace an old belief with an extreme new belief. You don't have to look at your bank account and pretend you are wealthy when you're not. A more useful shift might be much smaller. Instead of saying, "Money is always a problem," you might ask, "What can I learn from the way I'm handling money right now?" Instead of, "There are no opportunities," ask, "What opportunities might I be overlooking?" Instead of, "I always make bad financial decisions," ask, "What would one better decision look like today?" Notice what happened. The situation didn't change. The question changed. And sometimes changing the question changes what your mind searches for. This is where manifestation can be useful as a language for personal awareness. Many people who practice manifestation describe their experience as a shift in what they focus on, expect, and notice. They may feel that changing their internal state helps them become more aware of opportunities and more willing to act on them. You don't have to treat that as a promise that thoughts alone create financial results. Instead, consider it an invitation to become more conscious of the relationship between your inner world and your daily behavior. Your mind is constantly receiving signals. And every time you repeatedly direct your attention towards something, you are practicing a pattern of attention. Little by little, that pattern can become easier to access. This is one reason small mental shifts are worth practicing, because small doesn't mean meaningless. A tiny steering adjustment can change the direction of a vehicle over distance. In the same way, a tiny adjustment in how you respond to a recurring thought can change the pattern of decisions that follows. Maybe the shift is learning to pause before spending. Maybe it's noticing when fear is making a financial decision for you. Maybe it's allowing yourself to consider an opportunity before automatically rejecting it. Maybe it's recognizing a small financial success instead of immediately moving your attention to the next problem. These moments seem insignificant, but repeated moments become habits, and habits shape behavior. So here's something you can practice today. For the next 24 hours, don't try to change all of your thoughts about money. Choose one thought that appears frequently. Maybe it's, "I don't have enough." Maybe it's, "Money disappears too quickly." Maybe it's, "I'll never get ahead." When that thought appears, don't argue with it. Don't force yourself to replace it with something you don't believe. Simply pause. Take a slow breath and ask yourself one question. What else could be true right now? Then wait for an answer. Maybe the answer is, "I don't know yet." Maybe it's, "I can look at my options." Maybe it's, "I can make one better decision." Maybe it's simply, "This thought doesn't have to control what I do next." Spend 2 or 3 quiet minutes with this practice today. You are not trying to create instant abundance. You are practicing awareness. And awareness gives you the opportunity to interrupt an automatic pattern before it becomes an automatic action. Tomorrow, you can build on that, because the goal isn't to become a completely different person overnight. The goal is to become slightly more conscious today than you were yesterday, then slightly more conscious tomorrow. Day after day, those small shifts begin to accumulate. And this is something worth remembering when you feel frustrated by slow progress. You may be looking for a major breakthrough while overlooking the tiny moments when your behavior is already changing. Maybe you paused instead of reacting. Maybe you noticed a negative thought instead of believing it immediately. Maybe you made one calmer financial decision. Maybe you recognized an opportunity you would normally have ignored. Those moments matter. They are evidence that you can create a different response. And once a different response becomes familiar, another one can become possible. So tonight, take a few minutes to notice the thoughts that appear when you think about money, success, and your future. Don't judge them. Don't try to make them disappear. Just observe them. Then choose one thought and practice the small pause. One breath, one question, one different possibility. That's your practice for today. And remember, consistency often matters more than intensity. You don't need to change everything at once. You only need to create one small shift, then give yourself the opportunity to repeat it. Little by little, the way you think can influence the way you notice. The way you notice can influence the way you choose. And the choices you repeat can shape the direction you're moving. If this practice gave you something useful to think about, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what mental shift you noticed today. Then come back tomorrow and continue the practice with us. You can also check the description and the pinned comment for more resources connected to this journey. Remember, consistency is often more valuable than one powerful moment. One small shift today can become the starting point for another tomorrow.